Comic Collectors Guild members, this is Wes, also known as Comics Addicts, coming to you from Come Together, a spotlight on our membership. And today, we have a special guest from Warsaw, Poland. This is Miki. How are you doing, Miki?
Very fine, thanks for asking. How are you today, Wes?
Very good, thank you. How are things there in Poland now that we're all stuck at home?
Me personally, I'm working from home. Fortunately, I don't have to go to work anymore. Physically, we stay at home. We have those many restrictions in place. Um, we can only leave our houses to go to work, to go to a pharmacy, go buy some groceries, or help out with people in need. And we shouldn't be leaving our houses, for recreation, to have fun. We shouldn't, and the police is trying to enforce it pretty much. I haven't personally been treated with that. For example, I haven't received a ticket for riding a bike or something like this, but
Wow.
stuff happens.
So they're very serious there. Luckily, here on Come Together, we maintain social distancing pretty easily. Okay, so thank you for agreeing to be interviewed for our show. As you know, we're here to spotlight Comic Collectors Guild membership. To start off, why don't you tell me how you got into collecting? What was your journey like?
I first got into collecting stuff when I was little, because I started collecting, of course, toys. But also, as I became older, I've been collecting coins, notes, stamps, stuff like this. Mostly thanks to my parents, who encouraged me to collect things. Um, and this was also the time when I started collecting things Batman related, because he has always been my favorite character. But as I grew older, I switched to collecting different things. As a teenager, I started collecting CDs with music, currently having over 2,000 pieces around. But a couple of years ago, my joy of collecting things Batman related came back when I saw a Lego set, which was based off of the third movie in Nolan's trilogy. This was the set with the Batwing and the tumbler, and I thought I have to have it. And from there, it became a snowball effect, because it was one figure a month, then one figure a week, then And I've always promised myself I won't get back to collecting comics because I'll go bankrupt. But when this issue of crossover between Batman and Flash, the button, came out, I said to myself, okay, only this one, because it was a cool cover. It was, this 3D cover. And it started from there. And for the past year and a half, I bought around 100 collected editions, 30 separate issues, and one shelf of Batman figures became 2/3 of me and my fiance's living room. So
Oh, no. How does she feel about that?
uh, she's quite fine with that for the moment, but I had to move out my comic books from the living room to our closet just to make room for more figures. So it's going out of control
Well,
slowly.
I won't speak for everyone, Mickey, but I think that everybody who's watching this video can probably relate to your snowball effect theory.
Yeah.
Okay, so Batman is your figure, so you'll fit right in with a lot of the members of this guild, especially our administration. They're all pretty big Batman fanboys. Are there any other characters that you like? Any other issues that you're reading besides Batman-related issues?
Uh, I try not to, because when I become fond of something, it goes out of control. So, for example, when I started collecting CDs, first I started buying albums with the songs I liked, but then my type of collecting switched to, if I have one of their albums, I need to have all of their albums. So, you know, it's dangerous when it comes to comics and to characters, but pretty much Batman is my favorite. I don't have a second favorite. Uh, but when it comes to comic books, I think I am mostly DC because I know that many people will disagree with me because there are many um, dark characters in the Marvel universe, but for me, DC is grittier, more noir-like. So I prefer DC when it comes to comics. But Marvel is okay, of course. Spider-Man was my favorite character next to Batman when I was, a kid.
So in the 21st century, digital platforms have kind of taken over. You know, you can order music through iTunes and various other platforms, and the same thing with comics. That digital comics are becoming much more much more popular nowadays with apps like Comixology and so forth. How do you feel about that? Because you say you collect CDs, which is not exactly what 8-track tapes are, but it's pretty close if you think about the progression. How do you feel about that? You know, that sort of digital divide that is coming with collectors nowadays.
I think that uh, physical copies going to be distributed digitally was inevitable with every type of written information, such as newspapers, books, comic books eventually. But me personally, I'm not a fan of comic books in digital versions because you lack the immersion. I like to feel the paper. I like to flip the pages. I know you can flip a page on your smartphone and stuff like that, but it's not the same. Uh, and I don't think there would be a situation I would choose a digital over a physical. Of course, if something would be digitally exclusive, maybe then, but not piracy, but officially bought because you should respect the artist. And especially now, I don't know how it's currently in the States, but in Poland, all of the shipments of new issues are postponed because some of the printing facilities which print issues to ship to Europe are suspended. So, for instance, I was not able to read the last issue of The Curse of the White Knight, this continuation of this Batman story arc, which is one of my favorites. And I haven't read it online yet, and I'm not planning to. I'm waiting for an opportunity to get a physical copy.
I'll tell you, there's nothing quite like the experience of opening up a bagged bronze or silver age comic, and that it just has that smell to it. You know what I'm talking about? It's just got
Uh,
that old comic smell.
this old comic smell, unfortunately, won't be an option for me because those old comics when I was collecting them when I was little, they were mostly secondhand, so they were already opened. There used to be a place next to where I'm living currently. It was a small shop. It was at a local market. This guy had a small wooden shack where he had comic books in boxes. Uh, no collected editions, only issues. And it was a buy and a trade place. So you could buy a comic or bring in a comic you bought there previously and exchange it for a different one. So when I was little, most of the comic books I had were secondhand. Some of them were new, but the ones I'm buying right now, I'm buying new issues, new editions. I'm not collecting, the vintage comics from that era because that would be difficult. Uh, First of all, expensive. Second of all, and I like to read comic books and not keep them on the shelf in those boxes with the rating in the
So
corner.
you meant slabbing, correct?
Yeah, that's not something which I am personally doing. I'm keeping my comics in foil, but in Poland it would be difficult to send a comic to this rating association, which would evaluate the state of the paper, the fingerprints, etc. Plus, I don't know how it works because I have never checked it. But if you slab a comic book, you're not supposed to reopen it, right?
It's basically it's sealed in its own hermetic chamber. um,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a problem I have with it too. And actually, the last person I interviewed, Brandon, said the same thing. He said something actually quite profound. He's like, comics are meant to be read. You know,
If there would be a comic book cover, which I would be especially a fan of, and would like to have it as as a piece of art somewhere on the wall or on a shelf, then yes. But I would need to buy a second copy to be able to browse through it. So
yeah.
I don't think slabbing is wrong, but I'm just not personally doing it myself. So
And these days, buying more than one issue is an expensive proposition, I'm sure. How much does a new single issue comic cost in Poland?
first of all, in Poland, when it comes to new comic books with Batman, etc., you don't get them in Poland translated because when it comes to translation, we used to have single issues in the 90s, I think early 2000s, but I cannot say for sure because I stopped collecting comics for a couple of years when I was around 10 or 12. So I don't know how the market looked back then, but now there aren't issues in Polish. So in my language, you can buy only collected editions, which encompass a couple of issues from 5 to 10. It depends. When I buy single issues, I buy them online from two major importers, one of which is located in Krakow, and it's called Atom Comics. And the second one is located in Poznan, and it's called Multiversum. And they import single issue comics from the States, and you can buy them there. And the exchange rate is pretty straightforward because I don't know exactly what the exchange rate between Polish zloty and dollar is, but if your comic book costs 250, here it's around 18 zloty.
Is that expensive?
To give you an idea of how much 18 zloty is, 18 zloty is a Big Mac meal in McDonald's because I heard a lot that Americans like the McDonald's conversion rate to get a feeling of how much someone's currency is worth.
That's very good. That's definitely going in. Okay, so Mickey, can you highlight three parts of your collection that are comic related for our guild members that are watching now?
When it comes to comic books, I don't think there would be anything for me to highlight because all of those are current editions and issues which one can easily buy online or at your local comic store. Uh, I believe that if I would like to highlight anything from my collection, comic related, first would be uh, a piece which I found in my parents' basement because when I resumed collecting Batman related pieces, I thought I would revisit the basement and retrieve whatever was left of my collection because when I was younger, I used to have 90% of what Kenner put out in terms of Batman figures. Unfortunately, after 3 hours of browsing through the basement with my fiance, who loved it, of course, I found only one of my entire collection, which is this, I think, 18-inch Batman Kenner figure with a cloth cape, which had a button on the back, and the eyes and the bat symbol lit up. It was modeled after the Batman the Animated Series show. Second highlight of my collection, I think, would be a wristwatch, which I received for Christmas. The company, I believe, is called Invicta Watches. It used to be Swiss, but it was purchased by an American company, and it is now American made. And it was an anniversary edition watch with the Batman first appearance, Detective Comics, the 27th issue, I believe. You know, the cover with Batman in the old costume with the purple gloves. And I think the third highlight of the collection, uh, if I can call it a piece of my collection, would be a graffiti painting which my friends did for me for my 30th birthday in Warsaw, uh, on a very famous graffiti spot, which is a wall which surrounds a horse race track, a very famous horse race track called Tor Służewiecki. And they did a 3 wall segment graffiti piece for me, which was Batman themed. Um, it is in my collection partially because they did a panoramic photograph of the thing and they printed it on a piece of wood, and I have it in at my home as a piece which I can hang. So I
Nice.
think those 3 would be the highlights of it.
Did they happen to say how long it took them to paint that wall?
A whole day, and it's still there.
Nope.
Bearing in mind the fact that this is a wall where anyone can come and paint over and paint something new. It's been there since last October, and no one touched it. So
I respect the bat. One of the things that we highlight in the guild is the thrill of the hunt. So, is there any particular issue or any particular item that you are currently hunting for that you would love to find to add to your collection?
I'm trying to, when I add pieces to my collection when it comes to comic books, I try to purchase them arc wide. So I don't like buying something from the middle of an arc. If I'm buying something, I'm either buying the first couple of issues or the whole thing if it's available. And recently, I mostly prefer um, single single editions. You know, complete stories. So right now, I'm looking for Batman versus Aliens. I think when it comes to comic books. When it comes to figures, I don't think I'm hunting anything specific from the past. I'm just, uh, looking at what's coming out. But I think what I will be hunting for, what I'm looking forward to, is the figure from the new McFarlane series, which should be out in October. And they will be putting out a figure of Batman designed as from the pages of The Curse of the White Knight, because I think that those are the best drawn and the best written comic books about Batman in the recent times, next to Greg Capullo's, of course. The run with Scott Snyder, I would compare them both as the best things I read and watched Batman related recently.
In Poland, do they have cons? Do they have gatherings of people like conventions? Do they have groups that get together and do cosplay like we do in the States?
Uh, yes, there are. I saw that there are a couple of events throughout the year which are held in various cities, which can be compared. There is a Warsaw Comic Con. Uh, there are also a couple of festivals in the city of Łódź. I think it's called the European Comic Book and Video Games Festival. It's quite a big event. Um, uh, there's also in the city of Poznań, there's this convent which is called Pyrkon, but I do not, monitor all of these. I visit those which are held in my city, or if I happen to be around an event like that, I drop in. No cosplay though, but a lot of people do cosplay. I don't think it's currently at the same level as it is in the States. I don't think you see people who wear actual bat suits or stuff like that, but it happens. They're worth visiting in terms of collecting. I don't know if they're worth visiting in terms of fandom. I mean, autographs and stuff like that, because we do not see a lot of comic book artists coming to those shows, to those events. And when it comes to, uh, stars of TV shows, movies, and related to this world, you get, I don't know, you get the top tier people, and we get people who saw someone make coffee on the set of the Game of Thrones type of people. Not to insult those who came to Poland, by when I browsed, we get those people who you have to wait through the entire credits to see the name of.
I also wanted to ask you about translations. This is something that you brought up. Um,
Mhm.
how do the comic book publishers do with translations? Do they do a good translation? I'm hoping it's not just a Google Translate, that they actually have real people who understand the language translating for you. How can you explain that?
Uh, yeah, reading original comic books in English and reading Polish editions, I don't see this being bad quality.
That's good.
No one would have allowed Google Translate or something like this, because it's too serious of an issue to be taken for granted. And honestly, the only thing I can complain about is when it comes to the major arcs of Batman stories, so Detective Comics and Batman Rebirth. The only complaint from me is that there's one guy doing those translations, so we are three collected editions back compared to what comes out in US. So, being so impatient as I am, um, I just bought the last three editions in English, and they've just only now came out in Polish. So, and I can show you a difference between a US collected edition and the Polish one, and uh, the comparison, uh, unfortunately, uh, shows how better our collected editions are in comparison to the American ones in terms of the Rebirth and the Detective Comics collected editions.
All right, so Mickey, comic culture is really becoming much more prevalent in society in general, with MCU and the DCEU, making billions of dollars worldwide. Can you talk about your experience seeing these films in Poland? Are they subtitled? Do they dub them in Polish? How does that work?
When it comes to Poland, Poland is a part of the Eastern Bloc in Europe, which derives from the post and pre Second World War situation in Europe. We were, when it comes to TV, a major voiceover country, much like Italy, I believe. So most of the things which are aired on TV are with voiceover, so we can slightly hear the original version, and we have one person reading all of the dialogues for all the characters. When it comes to the cinema, um, it depends. Uh, the more a movie is expected to be viewed by the younger audience, the movies are dubbed. And it doesn't register quite well, in my opinion, in most of the instances, especially when it comes to DC and Marvel. when you watch dubbed animations such as Shrek or any other animated movies, that's okay because you don't have a real person to associate the voice to. But if you have Ben Affleck, who speaks in a voice of a Polish actor whom you know uh, from a different world, and you know how he looks like, the voice doesn't register with Ben Affleck's face pretty much. So also, as an adult, I would prefer to watch them in original versions. In our cinemas, it's not an option, so I watch them with subtitles. And when I watch them at home from DVDs or Blu-rays, I mostly watch them in the original version. Sometimes I don't have another option because, for instance, I recently bought this 80th anniversary collected edition of Batman the Animated Series and Batman Beyond, and there is yet to be a Polish edition of it, so all of the episodes are in English, and I'm watching them in this version.
Yikes, that's rough. It's a really interesting point you make, though, about Polish actors trying to do the voices for known characters and how they just don't fit. Um, that seems like it would kind of take away from the experience quite a bit.
It's easier to, you know, associate someone's voice with a character whom you don't know how the voice would sound like. So, for instance, in video games, Polish dubbing of video games is superb. Uh, if you have time, I would, suggest just listen if you have played The Witcher to listen to the Polish version because it's very good, and so are other games. Not all of them, of course, because there are games which are not listenable in Polish. For instance, Uncharted, but some of them are quite good, better than the movies, in my opinion, of course.
I know a lot of countries produce their own content too. I'm most familiar with Canada, of course, because it's our closest neighbor that's another country. And I've seen a lot of things from places like France and England as well. Does Poland produce its own content for television and movies that is either comic related or video game related or some sort of fandom related that you can recommend?
Hmm. I would say Witcher, but that's not a Polish production, of course. There was a TV series Witcher in the early 2000s, but I recommend not to watch it. Uh, you can watch it if you want to change your opinion about the new Witcher, especially the people who say it's crappy. If you see what we made in the early 2000s, you'll love the new edition. Uh, of a fun fact, if I'm not mistaken, the guy who actually played Geralt of Rivia in this show in the early 2000s is now the dubbing voice for the new Witcher for Henry Cavill. So for the people who relate to that old show, it's quite an Easter egg, so to say.
Yeah, I have an admission to make, I guess. I'm not a video game guy, and I watched The Witcher, and here's two things that are shocking. I actually thought it was pretty good. I enjoyed it quite a bit. And then it took me 3 episodes to figure out that that was actually Henry Cavill.
Oh, okay.
So,
It took me the whole season not to unsee him as being Superman. So
so it's sort of like the same thing, but in reverse. Okay, so Miki, clearly you're a Batman fan from Poland, so I thought it might be interesting for you to share the translation of some Batman characters. Okay, so in Polish, how would you say Batman?
Batman,
That's pretty close, right? How about Robin?
Robin,
Catwoman?
uh, Kobieta Kot,
How about the Riddler?
Człowiek Zagadka.
Joker?
Yeah, Joker is pretty much the same. The pronunciation is a little bit different. It's Joker.
Two-Face?
Dwie twarze.
Killer Croc?
In some editions in some issues, he was called Zabójczy Kroko, but mostly it's Killer Croc.
The Scarecrow.
Strach na wróble, or Scarecrow, because sometimes the original names are left, or sometimes they're being translated. It depends.
How about the Mad Hatter?
We have a translation for that. We had even before Batman, of course, basing on the novels, and it's Szalony Kapelusznik.
Kite Man.
It's the same. He's too lame to have a translation.
Oh, come on. Tom King did him some justice. How about Condiment King?
I would need to look this up, but I think it was Król Przypraw.
Right. So do you have any final words for our guild members? Anything that you'd like, any messages that you'd like to say to people, especially a lot of our members are over here in the States?
Stay healthy and stay safe in the present times.
All right. That's a good positive note to end on. Thank you, Miki, for being an interviewee for Come Together. We look forward to hearing from you in the future, and you stay safe as well. Thank you so much for being on.
Thanks for having me.
And that's a wrap for Come Together, the show that spotlights membership for the Comic Collectors Guild. If you would like to be spotlighted for our show, please send me a message in my DMs on Instagram at Comics Addicts. You can also contact our administration. Their handles will be at the end of the video. The Comics Collectors Guild is an open forum for all collectors and fanboys. Regardless of who you are and what you love, you are welcome to join for free. It doesn't matter if you are a lover of cosplay or if you're an artist, writer, inker. If you love Doctor Who, manga, Lord of the Rings, anime, just contact one of our administrators for details. All are welcome to join. Please consider subscribing, leave us a like or a comment down below, and we'll see you next time.
Don't engage in them. We do this together.